In this demo, we will learn how we can return pagination metadata. We'll return the data in a custom pagination header. There's a few pieces we will have to build to allow for that. Before we can return the metadata, we need to construct it. Let's add a new class to the services folder first to hold that data. We'll name it pagination metadata. And let me paste that in so we can run through it. It contains 4 properties to hold useful information for the consumer in regards to pagination, like the total amount of items, the total amount of pages, the page size and the current page. 3 of these are passed in via the constructor, and the total page count can be calculated from the other fields. Then let's see how we can construct this piece of data. There's a few ways to do that, but we've got one method here in our repository where we have access to all these potential parameters that can influence our metadata. It's the getCitizenAsync method. In this method, we have access to the name filter search query and inputted page number and page size. What we're going to do is return metadata from this method, next to the cities. Let's change the signature a little bit so this is allowed. Instead of returning a task of I enumerable of city, we return one of I enumerable of city, comma, pagination metadata. This is called a tuple. That's a language construct that allows us to return multiple values easily. And let's change this in the contract as well. There we go. Back to the repository. After the full query has been constructed, we execute a count-async on it. This is a database call, but we need to execute it to get to the total amount of items. Once we have that, we can construct the pagination metadata. For that, we pass through that total item count and the page size and the page number. Then we can create our collection to return. We don't have to change anything to the logic from the previous demos. And finally, we return both the collection to return and the pagination metadata as a tuple. Alright, let's switch to our controller. Here we now receive a tuple. Putting that in a cities entities variable doesn't seem right anymore. We want to put that into 2 different variables so we can easily access both. So instead of putting it in a cities entities variable, we put it in a cities entities and a pagination metadata variable. Cities entities is an I enumerable of city, and pagination metadata, well, that's our pagination metadata. The only thing that's left is adding this pagination metadata as a header to our response. For that, we call into add on the response headers collection, and we pass through a name for the header, xpagination, and a value, which in our case will be a serialized version of pagination metadata. For serialization, we use a JSON serializer. And that's already it. Let's give this a try. We're back in Postman. Let's send this request to get a paged set of cities again. That still seems to work. Let's have a look at the response headers. And here we go. We've got our xpagination header containing the pagination metadata. Alright, with that we covered paging. Let's have a look at the module summary.